Now, here's the other reality. This is just true based on over 20 years of flying. We don't always file flight plans before we go. We just don't, right? We did that in private training, but we really just don't do that. You know when you file a flight plan, or you know when you want to file a flight plan? When you look out the window and think, man, I've got no cell service. There's nobody around here. I would be screwed if I went down out here. Then you think, I should have filed a flight plan. Hello aviators, welcome back to The Finer Points. On this episode of The Finer Points, we are talking about the FAA's bid to remove remote communications outlets from across the United States. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to The Finer Points. The Finer Points is brought to you in part by the Ground School app, the essential app for new and experienced pilots. 4 courses, 1 price, unlimited access. Come get your free trial at getgroundschool.com. And by the patrons. The support I get on Patreon makes it possible to release outstanding flight training content to the internet through YouTube and through the podcast you're listening to here. Patrons get bonus content and perhaps most importantly, weekly office hours with me every Friday at noon Pacific. You can come and ask me your questions, spend time debating your future in flying, talking about different aircraft makes and models, or just listening along as we have engaging conversations. If you would like to see what an office hours session looks like, please visit patreon.com/learntfp.
Remain clear above where space frequency change is approved. Have a good flight. Frequency change clear, outside Bravo, make flight equal.
All right, aviators, welcome back. So, first of all, I just want to mention regarding office hours, this episode, what you're going to hear, the excerpts you're going to hear today come from last Friday's office hours session. I'm continually blown away by what happens in those meetings. I always learn something. Last week we had Jim Pittman, who's a DPE. You can find him online at flywithjim.com, and also Brian Schiff. You can find him at captainschiff.com. Brian is on the board of directors at NAFI, the National Association for Flight Instructors. He's also a legendary flight instructor and aviator himself. I'll be joining him on the Schiff Show on May 8th. You can find that at, I think it's schiffshow.tv. Maybe it's a new show he's doing. But anyway, these office hour sessions are just really engaging conversations. And this week last week, I guess, we got into what the FAA is talking about, removing these remote communications outlets from across the United States, which just would make it impossible for pilots to get in touch with flight service using a VHF radio. And I am strongly opposed to this, and I want to talk about it on this podcast because I want you all, if you can, to go to federalregister.gov, and I will provide a link in the description for this podcast, but go there and leave a comment. I believe we have until the end of May to leave public comments. We have to try to get this stopped. Now, I suppose the FAA is imagining that in today's world, you can use your cell phone, you can text with them, or a lot of people are using ForeFlight. Maybe they're just seeing that not very many people are using these RCO'S. But the bottom line is, flight service provides a lot of things to the aviation community, but perhaps the most important is search and rescue. Okay, they're the ones that are responsible for initiating search and rescue. And you may know that last fall, coming out of our airplane camp trip at Monument Valley, we had a forced landing. And, these airplane camp trips that I teach every summer, this year we're running 4 of them. If you're interested in joining us, there's still spots available. But, I've been doing this since 2009. And I can tell you from talking with the Tahoe Nordic Search and Rescue Association, or talking with Dr. Howard Donner, who's kind of our survival expert, or going through the experience we went through last October, that a personal locator beacon is not enough, right? And certainly if you're flying around with your iPhone thinking, hey, that's my satellite phone, or that's my PLB, my personal locator beacon, if I need one, it's definitely not enough. What we learned is that a shotgun approach to this is what matters. And if you want to be found, in the event you go down, you want to be found in the first 24 hours, you really have to have search and rescue set up for yourself. You have to have a flight plan. People have to know that you're missing and initiate that rescue right away. And personal locator beacons certainly can be a valuable part and should be a valuable part of your rescue effort, or the idea, as Howard says, that you can stay found. But it's not the end-all be-all. You need all of the things in place. You need a personal locator beacon. Ideally, you have an iPhone. Ideally, you filed a flight plan. Ideally, you declared the emergency because you had flight following. You want all of those things working for you. The data show, and we get this from the Tahoe Nordic Search and Rescue Association, that those pilots that have forced landings and they have filed flight plans, they get found within 24 hours. But if you don't have a flight plan, it can be as long as 72 hours. And that can make the difference between survival and a fatal accident. So last Friday during office hours, this came up in our comments, and we had a pretty robust conversation about it. So I'm going to play some excerpts from that session here on this podcast. But if you want to see the entire session, it's posted free of charge at patreon.com/learntfp. Let's dive in and hear a little bit of this office hours session where we dive into this topic. Somebody wrote in the comments, Don, Jason, and company, any comments on the pending removal of the FSS RCO removal, the FSS services? Don, is it pending, or are they taking comments at the moment? I really am opposed to this, obviously, but look, I'm not paying the bills, and I'm not, to Brian's point there, I'm not seeing how often these are used or not used. What I do know is that I tell, like when we teach at airplane camp is usually the place this comes up. But of course, if you're my student, you hear this all the time. The reality of the situation with flight plans, and flight plans are about search and rescue. And no, we're not beyond search and rescue. It's not like we don't need search and rescue services because everyone's iPhone has satellite communication these days. That's not a solution. And like I learned in October when we had our forced landing, even if you have a spot tracker or a Garmin InReach or a PLB or anything, you still want a flight plan. Okay. You still have these people out there called flight service that provide search and rescue free in the United States of America. And the data still show that people with flight plans get found inside of 24 hours. And if you don't have a flight plan, it's typically 72 hours, 24 to 36 if you have a flight plan, and closer to 72 if you don't. And for a lot of different reasons. Howard talks about all those different reasons, but people shouldn't think that, I have a Garmin InReach, I don't need a flight plan. The reality with search and rescue and contingency planning is you want to hit it with a shotgun blast. You want a flight plan and a PLB and your iPhone charged and all of it. You want all of it.
What if you're incapacitated?
Yeah, and if you're incapacitated, right, now you're reliant on your ELT maybe, or who knows, right? But like you want the first step, the very, very first step in staying found, as Howard says, is making sure that somebody knows you're lost to begin with, right? So in fact, I joke with Howard because I was coming home from the airplane camp trip in Monument Valley last year. And Howard sometimes says this at the end of his lectures out there, where he'll say something like, hey, look, I'm not telling you not to file a flight plan. I'm not doing any of that. He'll give us a bunch of caveats. Then he'll say, but even if you can just call your wife and say, honey, I'm taking off from Monument Valley and I'm expecting to be at Truckee by 8:00, or call a friend or whatever. But I proved to him that that's not enough, because I called him airborne from the Owens Valley. I had a cell signal, and I called him and I said, hey, Howard, the sun's about to set here. We're at the Owens Valley. We're going to be at Grass Valley. I think just after sunset, we're going to be getting there at 7:30. Like, he never called me that night. I never called him that night, right? He didn't call to check if I was there. I mean, for all he knows, I ran into a mountain out there, So it's like, you want this organization, flight service, just to know where you're expected to be and when you're expected to get there. That's step one in contingency planning for search and rescue. Now, here's the other reality. This is just true based on over 20 years of flying. We don't always file flight plans before we go. We just don't, right? We did that in private training, but we really just don't do that. When you file a flight plan, or when you want to file a flight plan, when you look out the window and think, man, I've got no cell service. There's nobody around here. I would be screwed if I went down out here. Then you think, I should have filed a flight plan. And in that moment, with no cell service, your only option is to call flight service on the radio and file and activate a flight plan, like using an RCO, using some sort of VHF radio communication. So to answer Don's question about any comments, I feel like if they're going to give us another way to communicate, if they're going to roll out like Starlink for pilots and we're all going to have internet everywhere we go, then fine. But until they do that, I'm really opposed to them removing these services. And I just find it shocking that in a time when aviation safety is like a tattered rag, we're like hanging by a thread. It seems like every other day we're talking about pilot error or wings colliding or helicopters falling out of the sky or whatever it is. In this moment, the FAA is going to reach out and pull away something that is a fundamental part of staying safe, and it just feels crazy to me. But anyway, like to Brian's comment, maybe no one's using them. Maybe I'm the only guy, or maybe airplane camp is the only time these things get fired up. I don't know.
You're not the only one using it. I still use it, and I will file a flight plan. And every time I go flying, I just hit open and close on here. It's just so easy that if you don't want someone looking for you, don't file one. And if it's a long cross country, that's when I use the RCO'S for making position reports. So that they cut out half the search and rescue part of the flight, half of the area.
100%. Yeah. And Brian, that's a good point. So Brian holds up his cell phone. Like in today's world, you can do it via ForeFlight. You can even do it through 1-800-WX-BRIEF, but you can text your plan open. You can text your plan closed. And like you were just saying, Brian, in flight, the other time that it becomes valuable is if, we've all had this experience, like I'll be flying, say, from the Bay Area to Tahoe on a direct line. And some of my passengers will say, is that Yosemite over there? Is that like, do I see like Half Dome over there? And they're pointing like 40 miles to the southeast. And I'll say, sure, do you want to go see it? And they'll say, yeah. And then we'll divert 30 miles southeast. Well, if we crash over there by Yosemite, nobody's looking on that line. Even if I did file a flight plan, they're looking on the line between San Carlos and Tahoe. So being able to just fire up an RCO and say, hey, we've got a flight plan on file. I just need you guys to either modify the route or add to the remarks that we're headed over to Yosemite for a little while to do some sightseeing. Just let somebody know.
Round robins too. So I'll file, if I'm going with a student who's going to practice approaches at 3 airports, I'll file a round robin flight plan back to my destination. But then I'll make position reports like, hey, here's a position report at airport 1. You don't need to look at leg 1. Here's a position report at airport 2. 1 and 2 are completed. If I go missing, you only have to look at the third leg, and so on. Yeah. Sorry, I don't raise my hand. I can't find the button to raise my hand, and I'm being rude. But
No, that's all right. I think Brian, you had your hand up the longest, and then Brad, I see you there too.
So I just did a long cross country from Denver to Oregon. And I mean, cross country filing a flight plan is just like, it's not, I mean, why not? It's easy. And it worked out really in my benefit because when I filed the flight plan, I put in my phone number and all of that stuff. And there were some sections between Wyoming and Oregon that I was low enough that I wouldn't hear ATC because I do flight following too. And ATC would actively call me and give me frequencies to change to. And every once in a while, my phone would ping and it would pick up the voicemail. It would transcribe, and then I would have the frequency to get on. So, I mean, they were staying in touch with me throughout that entire process, not just through radio, but also through voice and text. So, and I went out onto Reddit and I posted out there some very vague information about my cross country and said, hey, you guys did a great job keeping track of me. And I actually wound up having a conversation with one of the ATC folks that I was talking to on the radio. So I mean, why wouldn't you do that? It's silly.
Yeah. No, it's well, and yeah, and in my, so like when people come out on the airplane camp trips is when I really have them as a captive audience, especially in remote environments. And I'll say like the one thing there's a few things, but one of the things that I really kind of demand that everybody goes through, that the instructors at least do, is contacting flight service on the radio and filing a flight plan out of nowhere and activating it right then and there. Because it's really not that big of a deal. And if you don't have a flight plan form, they'll prompt you through it. You just tell them, hey, I don't have a form. Can you walk me through this? And they walk you through it. Most of them aren't grumpy about it. And just breaking that, I don't know why that seems hard to people. And ideally, we file it ahead of time. That's fine. And ideally, you have a cell signal when you need to file it in flight and you don't have to call them on the radio. That's fine too. It doesn't really matter. But I'm just saying, in my experience, it's usually when I look out the window and think, shoot, I should have filed a flight plan. Brad.
Sorry, there's a bunch of uses for this stuff that I feel like it would be a real bummer for it to go away. Like, there's plenty of airports that don't have good cell service, and like now you gotta like what go find the FBO and like get on a landline to call to open and close your flight plan. And then in the New York area, it's a little bit like random what frequencies approach is using for flight following, or you could use for flight following. Like it says on the chart, like, oh, this is in your this area, contact this frequency. But like, I'd say half the time, especially on the weekends, they're not using all the frequencies. And so you don't know. And at least a handful of times I've called flight service and said, I'm here. What frequency should I call New York on? And they'll tell me. And I don't know where to get that information otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. And, out where we are on the West Coast, if, when you really need a flight plan, there's not often flight following available. Sometimes they lose radar contact at the altitudes we're at. Does anybody know where I've been moving so fast over the last couple of days that I saw an AOPA article come through, which is how I'm even aware of this, but AOPA made it sound like you can still comment on this. Is anybody aware? Can we all?
It does look like that. I think there's I just have the link open. But there's a link to like the Federal Register notice.
I believe right now it's simply a notice of proposed rulemaking to, excuse me, do away with FSS in the lower 48. I kind of glossed over it, admittedly, because I'm in Alaska and they said it's going to stay in Alaska. So sorry.
You mean they're do away with the entire flight service station idea?
Yes.
Yeah, all the RCO'S. That's what it says. I just put the link in the
RCO'S and flight service stations, because they're down to 300 calls a day nationwide in the lower 48. So they're talking about doing away with FSS.
Oh, that's not what's in this notice, but maybe there's another notice for that.
Well, any chance you could put that? Oh, there it is, Brad. You put it in there. Thank you. Yeah. This is just such bad news. The FAA, they never miss an opportunity. Well, maybe we can all, at least there'll be whatever there are of us, 20 or so people. We can all go leave a comment, and maybe I can publish this as a YouTube video. I don't know. All right, you guys, that's a fascinating conversation. It goes on for like another 20 minutes. I'm going to limit it here because I don't want this podcast to go on forever. But there's some good stuff at the beginning that we skipped, some stuff at the end that you may want to hear. And just to sort of channel some forward-thinking people in the group that I did not include, there were some people saying, hey, look, let's think forward. Let's not fight too hard to get these RCO'S like to prevent them being from taken away, but let's try to develop new technology, such as what if a private company could follow your ADS-B track from point A to point B and at least be the eyes in the sky that initiate the search and rescue. So if it's Starlink, great. If it's some third-party company using ADS-B signals, great. I'm all for it. The bottom line is, until we have something like that in place, I really don't want to see the VHF communication go away. And I think we're doing pilots a disservice and potentially adding fuel to the fire where safety is concerned. We're all concerned about safety. In today's world, it is the one thing that could really shut down the industry, and it seems like we're fishing in the wrong pond, so to speak, as we look for a cure to the systemic safety issues. Anyhow, check out that office hours on Patreon. It's at patreon.com/learntfp. I'm Jason Miller. I want to thank you guys for downloading this podcast. Please share it far and wide. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment below if there's something you'd like to see. But most importantly, until I see you guys again, be safe and fly your best.